Excellent.
That works.
Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order of Tuesday, November 28th. And the flag salute. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional first people of Sitka. With gratitude, we proceed on Tlingit Ani. Sarah, roll call.
Mr. Mosher?
Here.
Mr. Pick?
Here.
Mr. Yestat?
Here.
Mr. Christensen?
Here.
Ms. Carlson? Here. And Mr. Swain?
Here.
Mayor Eisenbeis is absent this evening.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, that moves us on to correspondence and agenda changes. Seeing none, move on to there are no ceremonial matters. Go to special reports. Start with government to government. Oh. Are you going to call?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello?
Hi, Woody. It's Sarah calling from the Assembly. We're ready for your report.
Thank you. And to the mayor and assembly members, giving a report on our last couple of meetings at the tribe, November 1st and November 21st. The council approved the funding to replace the elevator at the tribal headquarters. The council appointed an election judge and an alternate judge at its recent elections this past couple of weeks. The council approved our enrollment resolutions and the council certified its 2023 tribal elections results at our last election. So it's been pretty light. That's all I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Woody.
All right.
Okay, now we move to municipal boards, commissions, committees, municipal departments, school board, or school district, sorry.
Hello, Vice Mayor Mosher and City Assembly members. My name is Tristan Gavon. I'm the school board president of the Sitka School Board, and I'm just coming to give my monthly report to you all, updating you on some happenings within the district and our upcoming agenda for this month for our meeting next Wednesday the 6th. So since I last came before you last month, Steve Bradshaw, our superintendent, is fully back to work. He dove right back in. One of the first things he did was attend our school board annual retreat, which was, as you all probably know, those retreats are pretty intensive. So really jumping into the deep end, coming back after being away for a little bit over a month. The other thing Steve has been working on since returning has had some conversations with John and city staff around Parks and Rec and the use of facilities, how we collaborate to ensure that both the schools and Parks and Rec have access and the facilities are well maintained, and really appreciate John's work on this. Kevin Knox, Barb Morse before that. Just really appreciate that and the partnership to provide more opportunities for students and adults alike. part of those discussions that Steve and John have been having as well, which you all may already be aware of, is the follow-up to our work session, or I'm sorry, last year's budget work session between the Assembly and the School Board, when we discussed the possibility of bringing some of those non-instructional items under the city, the pool, potentially facility maintenance. So I think those discussions are kind of in those initial phases, and we're looking forward to that picking up and getting into more of the details with you all. Let's see, kind of back to the school board retreat that we had at the beginning of November. So part of the focus was that was kind of our typical roles and responsibilities of school board members for new board members, a little bit of visioning and goal setting. We looked at the school climate and connectedness survey results to do some of our planning and goal setting, but really spent a lot of time on preparing for the superintendent search that we have coming up. And so had Timmy Tolis from the Association of Alaska School Boards there helping us and work through the job description, timelines, all of that. So that position is now out there in the public. We're accepting applications, doing recruiting, and we'll have our review to set finalists in early January. And we'll discuss more about the process, but one of the things that I think is pretty unanimous amongst school board members is just having that robust public engagement process. For all stakeholders, we want to ensure that school staff have the opportunity to weigh in on what they're looking for in a superintendent. We want students, we want families, we want communities all to have that opportunity, both what they want in a superintendent and then the actual finalists, giving us as much input as you can on those finalists, since that is really a community position. That superintendent works for all of us. As I mentioned, we have our December 6th meeting coming up next Wednesday. A couple agenda items I would highlight. There's going to be a presentation on the Sitka High School whale rearticulation class and project that they did. I'm looking forward to that. We will be accepting our FY23 audit, or presumably accepting that. That was completed within the last month, so our FY23 books are closed. I'm happy to report that one of our audit findings around federal grant reporting, we have implemented the corrective action plan and did not have a finding this year, so that's exciting to get that off, as a little blemish. However, I think having now an assistant superintendent has been a big help with that. That was something the assistant superintendent previously did, was federal grant reporting, state grant reporting, private grants, and so having that position and Dr. Deidre Jensen has really been a big help. Running out of time, just highlight staff and community partner and the work that they are doing to provide just a really high quality education for our kids. Do you mind if I get a couple minutes additional?
Tristan, don't, sorry, you know.
I know I can be a little long-winded. I'll try to. I only come once a month, I can come twice a month. Thank you, Vice Mayor Mosher. So just for this highlight, this is a highlight of the good work that our staff and community partners are doing, but I also want to draw some attention to the challenges we're facing, and this is particularly around the Alaska READS Act. So for those who are not familiar with the Alaska READS Act, it was recently passed as state legislation. The requirements for school districts in that are that all kindergarten through third grade teachers are trained in the science of reading. And so that has, a pretty big cost to get all teachers trained in that. We are encouraged and pretty much required to adopt a curriculum that involves the science of reading as well. So we're looking at having to review and purchase a new K-3 or potentially elementary school English language arts curriculum. And then for students who are assessed below proficiency in reading, we need to provide additional services. We need to provide family meetings. Each of those students needs an individualized reading plan. Each of those students will receive after school and eventually summer school interventions. All of those come with a cost. and the $30 BSA increase that the legislature and governor approved effective FY24, that $30 equates to about $90,000, or in that range for the Sitka School District. We're estimating our costs well over $250,000 per year to implement those requirements. So I wanted to highlight that, but again, highlight some good things that are happening, and that is a partnership between the district, the city, and the Sitka Sound Science Center called Lap Swim. It's a literacy grant through a rural cap, and that stands for Literacy After School Programs and Science with Math. And so again, Sitka Sound Science Center, the city's Parks and Recreation Department, and then Keep Shaheen were involved in developing that proposal. It funds staff for each of those 3 entities, as well as some supplies. For the school district, it funds part-time Keep Shaheen reading interventionists. So these are the kind of things we are having to do because we don't have enough funding coming from the state. And as you are all aware, probably at this point, we have not had a permanent increase to the BSA since July 1st, 2016, during which time inflation, according to national CPI, is 27.91%. And so our costs, much like the cities, have continued to rise, and then additional unfunded mandates that we're trying to meet as a community. But again, just really would like to thank all of those involved, recognize and thank for the Science Center, Janet Clark and Sarah Toby were involved with that. For the city's Parks and Rec Department, Barb Morse, and then for the school district, our Keep Shaheen principal, Mindy Berry. So just wanted to take the opportunity to recognize them, their hard work, and what not only the district, but the community and the city are doing to be able to provide our children that quality education that we all expect. Thank you.
Thank you, Tristan. Okay, I believe we have a 10-minute presentation by Ben Huey regarding the Sitka Trail Works. And when you're ready, just make sure you turn the microphone.
Thank you for having me, Deputy Mayor Mosher, members of the Assembly. We're really excited to announce that Sitka Trail Works has released the Sitka Trail Plan. This has been a couple of years in the making. You all have an email in your box I sent an hour ago with some correspondence with the Assembly members of the past couple decades. Members who are new, you can catch up on some of the interaction that we've had. And I wanted to take a moment to share what we've been working on and get a moment for your input and update the community on this landmark new plan. So in 2003, Sitka Trail Works facilitated the first trail planning process in the community, and because of that interagency plan, we have networks like the Herring Cove to Beaver Lake Trail, which starts on city lands and crosses into the National Forest. We have the Cross Trail Network, which weaves through city, state, and federal lands. These type of infrastructure projects are only possible when you have an entity like Sitka Trail Works that is multi-jurisdictional and can work with all the players. So that was our goal, is to continue capturing the benefits of health and economic development and well-being, quality of life, these priorities for our city, by continuing to invest in reconstruction and maintenance and new development of our trail system. So a couple years ago now, we launched this planning process, and we've had hundreds and hundreds of Sitkans involved. In our first survey, we had almost 10% of adult Sitkans give us feedback, and we got really good hard data about what people were interested in from a high level, the types of facilities they use and the type of facilities they want to use. And we took all that data and went into the field and looked for opportunities, and then used a citizen advisory committee with experts like Barth Hamburg and Jeff Budd and others who've been around in this business for a long time, vetted proposals that people put in, and narrowed down the list of proposals. This slide shows our public engagement process starting 2 years ago now. We had that first round of survey, and then the vetting process reduced the number of concepts we're reviewing. We vetted these all with the public land management agencies like state parks, the Forest Service, national parks, and the city public works. Have been working with those folks continuously throughout this process. And got a narrow list of projects, went back to the community, said, is this what you meant? What do you think about this? Had everyone rate each trail concept. It was a pretty extensive, like 20-minute survey, and still over 500 people took it and left comments. Between those 500 people, I read 3,000 comments on those projects. And so we feel like we have a pretty good representation of what the community wants and how we can provide that in the most cost-effective manner. We took those top-rated ideas and developed cost estimates, developed maps, continued to hone the feasibility analysis by working with agencies and digging into some of the details. And then just last month we released this planning document, which is still a draft under final agency review. So there's links in your inbox, and if you see any changes you'd like to see, I'd welcome those. And we're working on a MOU between all the agencies. We've got some revisions from Sitka Tribe and working with the Forest Service on their comments to the MOU, so John will have an updated version for you later. But we have a bunch of cool projects and a bunch of projects that I think will save us as a municipality dollars into the future. There's sections of trail, like a cross-trail connection between Yaw Drive and Indian River, that are substandard. They weren't built to what we're building trails to now. And that's a continual maintenance problem. It's always underwater and it's not meeting its purpose. And we can rebuild that with grant funding from the state or the feds and reduce long-term maintenance costs to the city. Sitka Trail Works is going to be a partner in this maintenance. We see that the city has a lot of miles of trail and not a lot of full-time equivalent employees dedicated to this trail work. Connor has a lot on his plate. So he and I are in regular communication. We were out just earlier this week clearing blowdown from the Thimbleberry Heart Lake Trail with volunteers, and we as an entity can fundraise in different ways that the agencies can't, and we can bring those resources as a partner. So we're looking forward to doing that work and looking forward to working with you all in formalizing this trail plan for the coming years and continuing to capture the benefits of these trails for our community. Thank you. Questions?
All right, thank you, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for the time.
Okay, that moves us to persons to be heard. Persons to be heard, participation on any item off the agenda. All public testimony is not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual.
Hi, my name is Lisa Bush. I'm the Executive Director of the Sitka Sound Science Center. And our organization works around the region with a team of scientists who study landslides. And our team wanted to give our heartfelt condolences to the city of Wrangell for the deadly landslide that just happened in their community. And we know as Sitkans how devastating that is as a community. So I wanted to say that. And then also, I just returned from the World Landslide Forum, and there were 1,200 people at this forum that meets every 3 years, representing 69 countries. And I guess I just wanted to report back to our community that we are not alone. People all over the world are working on better sort of improving landslide science, landslide prediction science. They've been doing landslide warnings for a long time in Taiwan, in Italy, in Switzerland, and I was mostly really heartened by the fact that there are a growing number of community-based landslide warning systems like the one we have in Sitka that really reflects our community's values. If you remember when we designed our landslide warning system, the community told us that they wanted to make their own choices. They want to go to our web app at sitkalandslides.org and see if we're at low, medium, or high risk of landslides, and then make their own choices. And these community-based landslides warning systems around the country, in the Philippines, in Colombia, in Sri Lanka, in Mexico City, they're all the same. They're based on reflecting their community values. Finally, I just wanted to also say that, well, just one more thing about the World Landside Forum is I just felt very privileged that Sitka was represented at the forum, and people knew of our landslide warning system from different parts of the world, so I thought that was cool, and I just wanted to pass that on to the community. But I wanted to remind the community also that we do have a landslide warning system, and we don't have a system where the city tells you what to do with that warning. So we have been suggesting that people find a buddy so that when there's a tsunami warning system, they can go uphill to their buddy's house, and if there's a landslide, they could go downhill to their buddy's house. So that's it, and thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, members of the Assembly. My name is Joel Hansen, and I have a brief progress report for you for the Jarvis Street Community Garden Project. The first bit of news, and probably the most important, is that we received our U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permit. Second, our campaign to raise money for the site survey has been very successful. Within a couple of weeks, we've received sufficient funds to reach our target, thanks to the generosity from a whole bunch of donors. And the surveyor will actually begin his work on site tomorrow. Third, if you recall your September 12th Assembly meeting 2.5 months ago when the garden discussion came up, you directed Municipal Attorney Brian Hansen to determine whether a competitive bid process would be required for us to lease the property. He concluded that it would, so we've been looking into what all that will entail. Since the start of the year, the city has issued numerous bid requests for different projects and services. We've reviewed those documents, and it seems likely to us that the Planning Department will probably choose to issue an RFP for the Jarvis Garden project, and that the bid request will probably resemble the Marine Services Center lease RFP issued in January, since both involve the leasing of municipal property. The Marine Services Center bid request was 5 pages long. It set a timeline of 2 months for the process to run its course, beginning with advertising for bids and ending with a signed lease contract approved by the Assembly. That timeline suggests that if the Planning Department were to issue a similar RFP for the Jarvis Garden project in the next couple of months and allow for a similar amount of time for the process to complete, then it's possible that our lease contract could conceivably be issued by spring, which would be great. But we understand that the Planning Department is short-staffed right now, so we're concerned that if the Jarvis Garden RFP is not issued in the next couple of months, we could very well end up missing some or maybe even all of an entire construction season. Also of concern is the fact that our ability to secure grant funding is contingent upon securing a lease contract. So the more time that passes between now and April or May without a lease, the less opportunity we will have to finance our 2024 development goals. We very much appreciate the Assembly's interest in this project and are very grateful for your continuing support. We'll keep you updated, and if you have any questions about this project, please feel free to reach me. I'm always available. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is this thing on?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Now is it?
There you go.
Okay. I just wanted to have a positive note to share with you before I talk to you about other things later. I wanted to send my thanks to the Public Works Department. I had a terrible hole in my road that's on city property, but it's the road where I live. And they came and filled it up for me. And in calling to thank them for their service, I talked to your Public Works Director. And he said one thing, this is just an FYI for the public, but he said that those who live on gravel roads when we come through and grade and then fill the potholes, that if you drive a little slower for a while until it gets compacted, you might have a while longer before it has to be maintenance again. So that saves the city money and saves your cars because you don't have all your undercoating being ripped off. So that's just a kudos for wonderful public service. The only other thing I can tell you is that I also offer to the police department because I had a scam caller that was telling me I won the big prize for the Publishers Clearinghouse, and just so you know, they will never notify anybody on the phone if they won anything, and so hang up on them. Took me a little while to figure it out, but meanwhile, I just want you to know that they're out there, and this one's been trying to scam Sitka. So, thank you.
Yes, and can you get your name for the record?
Oh, sorry. Kim Elliott, 7 Maxudoff Street, Sitka.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Richard Green. I just want to let you know I do transcribe these meetings, and my software that transcribes them, when they mention Mr. Yerstad's name, it transcribes it as "Yes, Dad," which I thought was fun. I can't say in public, but how it translates other people's names. But "Yes, Dad." I'm sure you hear that all the time at home. One of the important things that I want to bring up is the federal subsistence designation for Sitka. It is very important because that is the distinction between rural and non-rural designations, and this is done through the federal government. As you may or may not know, Ketchikan, for the third time, is seeking to change their designation from non-rural to rural. And if you look at Ketchikan, it's interesting because we are catching up with them in many, many things which actually make us non-rural. And believe it or not, one of the side issues for the tourism, because of the increase in infrastructure, may be a potential loss of our rural designation. And I have to tell you that I did read the federal rules, and I invite you all to read them. Certainly don't have enough time to go over, and you will see that some of the things that they mention there for designating yourself as rural are basically evaporating here in Sitka. And I think that it should be on the top of the list as to where Sitka is going on rural versus non-rural, because it means our subsistence designation will be taken away. And I think that that would be something that people should definitely pay attention to, and it really needs to be on the foreburner. Read it and you will see that Sitka is becoming big city Alaska, and I just think it's important. Another thing that I'd also like to let the Assembly know that Kurt Wilders in the Netherlands has won and might be the future Prime Minister. And I'm sure that other people who have followed the news also know about Javier Milei, who won as president. And I think these are interesting developments in world history. But think subsistence, because this could be a casualty. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Austin Granter, members of the Assembly. In the previous 2 meetings, I brought up drugs in schools. I'm bringing it up again because over the past month I had time to speak with the president of the all-student body as well as student council for the Sitka School District. And they reported that they are still having marijuana problems, still having drug problems, meth, marijuana, heroin, alcohol. I sent multiple emails to the assembly, multiple emails to the city, received no response. As of last week, I filed a complaint with both the DEA, Department of Justice, and the Department of Education. And yeah, the all-student body essentially said that it's also contributing to the mental health crisis both within the state and within the school district. So it would be greatly appreciated if the city could both assist in the mental health crisis and the drug crisis within schools. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Is there anyone else for persons to be heard? Okay. Before we move on to the next point of business, I do want to, something Lisa said, I failed to mention those who lost their lives in the landslide in Wrangell. And I just want to, as Deputy Mayor, just represent the city as we acknowledge the tragic loss and suffering for those who lost their lives and for those and their families. I'd just like to observe just a moment of silence, and then we'll move on. So we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Can I have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes from the November 14th Assembly meeting. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment? Seeing none. Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve the minutes, Mr. Christensen?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Mr. Yesta?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mr. Salim?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
And Mr. Pegg?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0 on item A.
Okay, this moves us into unfinished business. Item B. Can I get a motion?
I move to approve ordinance 2023-23 on second and final reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2024 NeoGov HRIS recruitment platform.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We'll move to public comment.
My name is Kim Elliott. I live at 7 Maxuda Street. Regarding this, it's like, okay, you're going to spend more money than what you intended to do. So my question is this. If you could even look into the possibility of having, or else giving me permission to paint a crosswalk across my little section of road so that people know that it's a crosswalk and there might be a vehicle coming out of there, hoping to get through the tourists. That would be a boon. The only other thing would be, and I've talked to ADOT, but I've been trying to get...
Point of order. Kim, I think you're on the wrong item. This is about a software program.
Oh, I'm very sorry. I thought you were on that
No.
CWAC one.
I was about to say something, but I was seeing if you were going to get there, but you didn't.
I am very sorry. My apologies.
That's okay.
I'll come back and start over
That
again.
sounds good. Thank you.
I'm
No,
sorry.
that's okay.
I just want to get out of here.
Good evening, my name is Richard William. This is item B, supplemental appropriations for NeoGov, which is a software program, a human resources information system, and for recruitment. The city is asking for $205,000 to pay for it. It appears to be a piece of software which will be maintained over a period of 3 years. What was eye-opening at the last meeting was that the administration of HR and the recruitment were done basically with just advertisements and the website. That was truly a stunning eye-opener. However, though I appreciate the use of this, and it's long overdue in having this for the employees, it will not affect the workforce availability and the shortages that exist here in Alaska and across this country. I do feel that what can I say? This is something that is needed, and go for it. But I don't think it may answer all your employment wishes. That has to do with taking it seriously, making the city the best place to work in. I think that was part of the strategic plan or some other statement, and to take that very seriously and make it come true. Otherwise, word of mouth will keep people away. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll go back to the assembly for deliberation. Anyone? Okay, all right. We'll go to Sarah.
All right, on the motion to approve ordinance 2023-23 on second and final reading, Mr. Yestad?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. Pike?
Yes.
And Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Motion passes. Did I call everybody? 1, 2, 3. I didn't call everybody. Mr. Saline.
I say you have to.
Mr. Saline? Yes?
Yes, true.
Okay. Thank you. Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to new business. Item C.
I move to approve ordinance 2023-24 on first reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2024 Seawalk Phase 2.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Before we go to public comment, Ron Vincent, public. Just hold on one moment.
Okay, I just wanted to finish my statement.
No, you'll get it soon. We're going to have our public works director give just kind of a preview real quick before we go to public
Oh,
comment.
good. Come here, Julie Weiss. Hi, I'm talking to you.
Good evening. My name is Ron Benson. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Sitka. Tonight's request is asking for a supplementary appropriation of $157,783.16 to cover the City and Borough of Sitka's match portion for Phase 2 of the Seawalk project. It should be noted that this additional funding that's being requested is due to inflationary costs on the project. Phase 2 of the Seawalk is primarily funded by Western Federal Lands Grant, which covers 90.97% of the overall project cost. The remaining 9.03% of the project costs are covered by match funding provided by the Alaska Department of Transportation and the City of Sitka. Funding provided by the City and Borough of Sitka has to date been in the form of CPV funds. The funding that's being requested this evening will also be drawn from CPV funds as well. Phase 2 of the Seawalk project will extend a walkway along the waterfront from the east base of the O'Connell Bridge beneath the bridge to serve the lightering facility. The project was originally developed through CPB master planning and a number of other master planning efforts that have been going on since the late 1990s. see. The primary goal of this project, or this phase of the project, is to divert pedestrian traffic to and from the lightering facility beneath the O'Connell Bridge. This last year, as many of you probably experienced, there's a lot of people that'll be crossing the road in and outside of the already existing crosswalks, and this is supposed to help prevent that or reduce that. The project is currently scheduled to break ground in the fall of 2024, and there are public engagements to finalize the project details lined up for the coming months. So there's a little bit of time before we get to actually breaking ground. There's a little bit of flexibility there for more public engagements. I think our last public engagement was about this time last year, November 30th, 2022. It should be noted that the project is being managed through the Alaska Department of Transportation, and they've actually offered to deliver a presentation if there's any further questions or any kind of deep diving that you guys would like to see. And then my last note here is just outlining the fact that the grant is provided by Western Federal Lands. That grant is completely taxed. So what that means is any additional funds or any additional expenses on this project would require the city to absorb those hits. So this request includes a minor 25% contingency. So that's something that's been added to. That's what I have.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go to public comment, and when it goes to discussion, if any of the members have a question, we'll bring it up.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you. So we'll move ahead to public comment.
Okay, I'm quite embarrassed about my other mistakes, but on the other side of it is, I think this is a real...
Sorry, can you state your name?
Oh, sorry, Kim Elliott, 7 Max Sudar Street. The Seawalk, when it was all got to really get going, my husband was very sick and I wasn't in town, so I wasn't able to know what was going on. Since then I've lost him, but that's not the point. I live right at the base of the bridge, and my house is the last road when you're coming off of the bridge. There's parking on the realty office side, and there's at least 2 cars that are there all the time. So the crosswalk is right next to where the cars are parked on the bridge side of the road. I requested ADOT to consider moving it just across to the other side so that the people coming off the bridge could see people trying to cross the street. When I was, a few years back, a young boy was very seriously injured there. It was a bad accident. And my husband was still with me, and he took care of the kid, and I called the ambulances. But I've seen very many seriously close calls there. I know I can't stop this project, but I could ask for a couple of very small changes. One, move the crosswalk to the other side of the street. It still leads right to the church. And the other would allow me to get out if I had an emergency. And other than that, I'm trying to figure out how I can make some kind of knowledge for the tourists that are walking there to know that this is a road. It might be a one-way street. You know, everybody takes turns using that road. But just saying, is that for the record, I would just like you to be aware of that, and that's all I can ask. And that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Well, good evening. My name is Richard Wayne. This item is item C, the supplemental appropriations for phase 2 of the Seawalk. And one of the things you need to know is that it's funny how there's a repetitive theme on many of the things that the Assembly deals with, and that's called increased costs, not only due to inflation, but due to everything else in bringing goods and services here. But also the Seawalk has had a lot of complications in relation to land ownership and changes and so forth. One of the disappointing things about it is that it's taking shoreline away. And if you go over by the park and so forth, you see that it's just kind of disappearing. And my notion is that, think about it for a second, would we be building this if it weren't for the tourists? And so in essence, we are transforming Sitka for the tourists. If we had a different notion, we would probably utilize our land better. I think this is, at the end of the day, is going to be basically scarred, our land. And if you must know that the Sitka, city of Sitka, will be responsible for its maintenance from this time forth and forevermore. I don't see anything in the budget for that. How much is it going to cost to maintain and so forth? I guess that'll just be bled into various budgets. But the important thing here is that the addition that they're giving is, like greater than 30%. Originally, it was $285,000, and now it is $442,000. And so when you think of these things, we hear in our budgetary processes, well, the CPI, depends which CPI you use. This is a significant percent. It's not 6.2% or whatever we're doing with our budgets. This is, 30, 40%, and we have a 25% contingency fee in here in order to make sure that we don't get caught. And these are the realities of construction and what we're doing. And to me, it is just very important that, what are we doing this for? And if you think about the reasons, you will scratch your head, I think, and maybe think that we could have used all of this money, $4 million plus, for doing something, I'll just say, so much more creative and beautiful, or to enhance the beauty of Sitka and not detract it. Go take a look at the construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else for person to be heard on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to assembly deliberation. Questions?
Yeah. I think this is a reasonable request to bring it to the budget. We've been working on this for, I'm trying to remember when we first brought it up. It's been at least 15 years. So, I think it'll be a nice walk area that tourists won't be the only ones using it. But anyway, I don't see any problem with getting it over the finish line, so to speak.
Thank you, JD. I didn't see you before. Okay,
thank you. I've got some questions for the Public Department, if that's either Ron or Michael, or both. I don't know. As a new member of the Assembly here, and also somewhat more recent to town, again, I may be missing some of that 15 years of back information here. So my questions kind of run the gamut of now and past and how and why and the collaboration involved. So thank you for that. The website, the city's website was really helpful in some of that background. I looked also at the APDOT's website and it directed us to the city's website. The last reference there was what Ron mentioned, that November 2022 review. So in the last year, we've moved towards construction. Do you know, or can you give a little update on what this money is about? We're looking at increasing the budget due to inflation and looking at a 25 contingency. It seems like a path, like rocks and concrete, like what needs that higher contingency, please?
The, excuse me, the 25% contingency in particular, when you're looking at that the federal side of the equation has no more additional funding for this, so that's only 25 contingency on our match amount. So it's actually a very small contingency, because if it goes over in any way when we get that construction bid, we'll be covering 100% of that cost. So you're kind of hitting on it. It's a pretty basic project. It doesn't need a lot of contingency in it, and that's why that number is actually, percentage-wise of our money, it's high, but percentage-wise to the project, it's a very small contingency.
Thank you. Just that little bit of clarity could save a lot of people a deep dive into this packet. I appreciate that. Another piece in this front end, it says construction starting in February. Was that a typo? Is it really fall of next year?
That's, yeah, it's going to be fall of 2024.
Great.
Following the tourism cruise season.
Great. And the division of the segments out of the overall, planning design only for segment 1, planning design construction segment 2, planning and design only for underneath the bridge. Segment 3 is where are we at, I guess, the planning and design for all 3 of the segments if construction on 2 is going to be about a year from now.
So all 3 segments are about at a 65% design level submitted from the designers to DOT at this point. We haven't gotten to see that package. It's coming to us very soon. We reviewed the 35% level. The public meeting was just prior to the 35% being completed in a concept level to get feedback from the public. They had a couple of alignment options, and so they built that feedback into the 35% for us to review. So we're sitting right at getting ready to review the 65%, and then that will launch into the next public meetings to show how things have been incorporated and updated since a year ago into that. And that will then complete the environmental process. There's some ongoing coordination and partnering with the tribe through the environmental process that has to come together as well. So everything's in the federal arena. You're not allowed to go past 65% until the environmental is completed. They actually feel like that design is more or less complete, but technically they have to hold it at 65. So we'll see very little change between the 65 and the finished product is how this is set up to be, unless we as a community drive some change in direction on it. Barring that, we're design-wise very far along.
Thank you. That's very helpful, because there was a question there. If we have this match, and it seems like there'd be a specific number, there wasn't a round number, so how far along the process are we? 65% with one additional funding level. If the community doesn't change the design, it doesn't seem like there'd be another funding request coming forward. There's just good questions there to ask. I'm glad you guys both are here to help me learn this. Is there any piece that the state is contributing since the federal money is tapped out? Is all the additional money going to come from the city? Did I hear that?
Yeah, all the additional match funding comes from the city for this increase. They contributed to the first allotments of the project, but yeah, for the addition, it's on us.
And when that comes to you guys, I would really encourage at the next review, say we've all appropriations for 2 readings, to have that presentation from the state, to be able to really know what we're getting for this money. That seemed like a very good. This is taxpayer money, it's CPD money, but as a member of the assembly, we are beholden to checks and balances of taxpayer money. So knowing what that design is, knowing what we're getting for this additional appropriation and our original is important to my process. Please do coordinate that presentation for the next assembly meeting in advance of the second reading and vote on this. Is there any, because it says, so under each in the packet on page 6, the project milestones, I think we're no longer looking at those dates. Those dates have been updated for all of that section. Okay, thank you. That's very helpful because it just didn't seem likely. And is because this becomes a city asset after construction, that is now something that needs to be maintained by your guys' department. Is there capacity for your full-time employees to maintain, to shovel, plow, attend to flower beds, and all of those things that come along with bringing something into your maintenance needs?
That'll need to be something that's added into this year's budget process.
That's an important factor to read. When we improve things, it's important to have a maintenance plan to them, and absolutely paths, trails, outdoor recreation is key to the well-being of our community, and very, very important for the strategic plan, quality of life. But if we can't maintain to a high level of safety for our locals and our visitors, then we need to look into some of these agreements more thoroughly and come up with different strategies. So if that's something too that can be available information-wise for the next vote, I would value that. I don't believe in bringing things in and paying for them if we can't maintain them long term. Thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you guys could stay up, I have a comment, but I want to wait until Chris.
I think it's been, what did we say, a year since this came, the design forward to the public. And I know I've heard it quite a few times from the public that they're concerned about some of the shoreline being taken up with the expansion of the project, clam beds, eelgrass, all that. Do you remember how much the tow is actually going to extend into that area?
I couldn't give you an exact dimension off the top of my head here, and that's something we can focus on in the presentation, show some drawings of that. It's really a pretty minimal expansion. We're only really getting into some of the eelgrass, and one of the protected species that's been most identified through the environmental process is sea stars are highly protected now, so we just did a dive survey on that and didn't find any in the area. So the clam beds and a lot of the things that were stressed as a concern are not in the project boundary of fill at all, but we're coordinating with the tribe to educate and honor those things and have signing and interpretive signage and sort of draw awareness to those things and make it as much of a positive as we can for them.
Yeah, I actually see this potentially being good for that, because I know herring every now and then do spawn there, and that would be a great place to be able to watch it from. I guess I remember from the presentation the tow only extending out like 5 feet, but I was kind of hoping for confirmation on that, because the year is a long time for me to sometimes remember numbers. So
yeah, it's more than that. Maybe at least the width of the path, so you're talking 8 to 10 feet.
Okay.
A little bit more than that, but we can show that in better detail with the drawings.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. I guess that's the question.
Thank you. Good comments from both JJ and Chris. I concur, agree with JJ about having a presentation. I would appreciate that if you can organize that for the next meeting. I would appreciate that. So for me, this is a great project. My concern is, in the packet that you said, the federal fund is tapped out, federal grants tapped out, so we're 100% on the hook for anything extra. Like, and we're just talking about this one area, right, between the bridge and Sitka Hill.
Correct.
Do you have any idea, like, what happens if the construction costs go way out of control and we're in it? And do you have any idea, estimates on how much? I mean, just asking to come up with a number off the top of your head. The fact that we are now on the hook for 100% of the rest of it is concerning. What do you think about? Do you have any comments on that?
Well, the contingency is to help with that. It's not uncommon. Some of the projects that we're seeing right now are almost done with from our original estimates. I think as we get closer to our 95% design and then 100%, I think that we'll have a better estimate and we'll be able to pull the plug hopefully ahead of time.
Okay. Hey, good work, guys. It's not that I want to do the project. I do. Just the financial commitment is a little concerning, but I'm going to vote yes. And I'll see if you have any questions. I guess I'll get back to your seats. Thank you very much. Oh, yeah, JJ, go ahead.
Sorry, one more quick question. What is the project delivery method for this? Is it a GMP so we know where we're locked into?
No, they're doing a traditional design bid build. And I would like to add, I mean, Ron alluded to that in terms of pulling the plug, even though no one else is bringing any more funds to this project, it does not mean that if it goes over, it just goes over and we're on the hook to cover that. That would take an amendment of this agreement, so it would come back before the assembly if we open the bids and they're greatly above, have the opportunity to decide if we proceed and add more money or not. So it's
Okay. Yeah, it's always challenging when integrating between federal, state, and local. And if it's our money that we manage through the federal entity with design from the states, like who really is projects is this? And that gets a little confusing. But yeah, thank you.
And I will acknowledge that our portion, will be coming from the CPB funds, which for anybody in the public who doesn't know, it's money from the head tax from the cruise industry. We don't always have a free hand to spend as we wish. It's not like the general fund, so that's why it's coming out of here because it's aligned with the requirements for that. So you guys can go back to your seats. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no more discussion. Sarah, can you call the roll?
All right, on the motion to approve ordinance 2023-24 on first reading, Mr. Saline?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mr. Pike?
Yes.
Mr. Yesta?
Yes.
And Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
And the motion passes 6-0 on first reading. Item C.
Okay, so it's right a little bit past the top of the hour. Let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. Okay, so break is over. I'd like to bring the meeting back now. So we are on to additional new business. Item D, can I get a motion?
I move to approve resolution 2023-27 on first and final reading of the City and Borough of Sitka to support raising the maximum available Alaska Department of Transportation Harbor Facility grant to $7.5 million for eligible projects on an annual basis.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Before we go to public comment, we're going to have Stan Eliason come up and present a brief overview, and then we'll same thing like we.
Good evening, Stan Eliason, the Harbor Master. So I met with the Harbor Masters Association here back in October. I've been a member on the board for almost over this is a long time due here, we believe. This is just nothing but from raising the statutory amount of $5 million to $7.5 million. That would help the municipalities out quite substantially. As an example, we can take Crescent Arbor, that was built for $13 million, the state provided $5 million, and we had to borrow $8 million. If this were in place, it would probably look like we would have to bond for 6.5, and the state would kick in 6.5. So this is really important to myself and to the West Arbor Masters Association.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead and call you back up if you have any questions. Public comment?
Good evening. My name is Richard Ween. This is item D, which has to do with raising the grant money, increasing support for harbor matching grant amount from $5 million to $7.5 million. Now, it doesn't take much math to show that that is 33% increase. And this is based on the fact that that this is from July 2006 to July 2023, utilizing the CPI, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that this was the amount that was determined that this should be increased. And clearly it is long overdue and you need to do it. But I think the memo says it all, and this is now a repetitive theme. And you got to keep thinking every time you're talking money here, it's a repetitive theme. On the fiscal note, it says the costs associated with construction, shipping, and mobilization to remote portions of Alaska have outpaced the National Consumer Price Index. Duh. And that has been going on forever here, and something like that will never change. I don't really anticipate, except in thinking that prices of fuel may go down for the election, but that's, you have to follow the petroleum industry to know that that's kind of a false number. So what happens here is that here we have a 33% increase, which is absolutely justified. But these are like big numbers, and in a very real way, these are numbers that the city is going to have to face. It was within the last item where you have increases in, expenses which were not factored in, but there comes a limit when you can keep, peeling off the bills from the general fund or any other little funds. This is serious stuff. So just, this is the object lesson, and I think it's important since it is you, the assembly, that hold the purse strings. So the costs associated with construction, shipping, and mobilization to remote portions of Alaska have outpaced the National Consumer Price Index. Somebody's going to get a Nobel Prize in economics for that one. Thank you.
Again, I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. I want to tell you that
I know you said your name, but it's proceed.
Kim Elliott, Sitka, 7 Matsuda. I just wanted to tell you that I was the executive secretary for the Alaska Harbor Masters Association during the time when we were getting this implemented in, I think it was 2007. And I was working for the harbor and working for the Alaska Harbor Masters Association. And I was charged with getting everyone across the whole state on board back when email wasn't quite so easy. So it was a lot of letter writing and phone calls. We got it implemented. And now I ask that you please don't miss this opportunity to do everything you can to get this passed and upgraded, and keep an eye on it. You know, we have been benefited with, let's see, 4 floats, the first 4 floats in Crescent Harbor. I think Sealing Cove still needs a lot of help. Some of the Elias are the old Thompson Harbor, and several other harbors that we all want to be able to use if we have a boat. And I think AMB, it may have been before that. But I just want you to know that it took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get this through in the beginning, and so please don't let it go away. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public or persons to be heard? Okay, before we go to some of the deliberation, I just want to clarify for those listening, the resolution doesn't accomplish this task. It asks the governor, I'm just going to read the now therefore be it resolved part of the resolution. It says now therefore be it resolved that the city of Rural Sitka respectfully urges the governor and the Alaska legislature to amend Alaska Statute 29.60.800, raising the maximum harbor facility grant fund award to $7.5 million per eligible project. So just to clarify for people who might be listening right now. So somebody discussion? Tor?
Yeah, which actually is a nice lead-in. It won't hurt. Not quite so sure what our chances are, but it won't hurt. And I think this may be one of those things that we pass every year until we have a better situation in Juneau. But I also know that when we do that, it starts to build up its own kind of momentum. So I guess don't be shocked if this doesn't work this year, but I'm sure we'll probably have one with a little bit bigger number next year, and then next year, and eventually they might pass it just to shut us up. And because we obviously are not going to be the only ones passing this in Southeast or in the state. So I'll be very much voting yes on this.
Chris?
Yeah, this is going to be a really big deal for our harbor systems. We still, in our harbor plan, we still have the second phase of Crescent Harbor that needs to be replaced. Sealing Cove is on the docket next, and then the big elephant is Eliason, which is going to be a big one. That's going to be the expensive one. Right now we have it estimated at $35 million. But considering construction costs since that estimate, I would almost double that. So yeah, anything will help. I know this is probably getting a lot of support throughout Southeast. I'm starting to see it in other municipalities, what they're doing with their harbor systems. Ketchikan is proposing a 60% harbor increase over the next 4 years. So they're obviously seeing some major construction increases and are worried about their harbors being replaced. So yeah, anything will help. I think there's going to be a big push around any municipality that has harbors. So this is huge for us and all of Southeast. So I'm definitely in support of this.
Thank you, Chris. Good.
Yeah, I support this as well. However, I think we might want to consider, not just that dollar amount, but then maybe a line including annual increases based on inflation. I mean, just so that this process, should it go through, wouldn't need to be redone over and over again, or to really kind of put notice to the fact that these costs are not going to be going down. So, something along those lines would be something I'd be interested in looking at too.
Anyone else? Yeah, I'm going to support this. Tim, if you wanted, you could, in order to accomplish that, I think you need to make a motion to amend this. I'm not sure if you're prepared to do that. I do agree that something like that would be helpful. I just don't know how to word it off the top of my head. So I'll just talk for a minute if you decide to do it.
I'll bring it back next time.
Okay, sounds good. All right, I don't think there's any more discussion, so Sarah?
just a one reading. Just stating
Do
that.
that now then. I'd like to amend this resolution to include a statement following the dollar amount to read and annual increases based on Anchorage CPI.
Second. What?
What line are you?
35.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Before we go to discussion,
okay.
can we ask Dan a quick question?
Yeah.
This has a direct bearing on this.
Yeah, yeah.
So is this, did we write this resolution, or is this one that all the harbor masters across the state are asking their city councils to
This is
accept?
a cut and paste from the actual general harbor master or association president.
All right, because my question is, do we want to do that and be different than everybody else? That's all.
So let's, thank you, Stan. So it's been moved and seconded. So let's go to public comment on the amendment, and then we'll come back and discuss. So, Stan, we'll call you up. So, go ahead, sir.
Sorry. Tim, before we go into public comment, I'm now on line 35. Could you just say that one more time?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So raising the harbor facility grant fund award to $750,000 per eligible, $750,000 and to be increased annually by the Anchorage CPI per eligible project.
And did you mean 7.5 million?
What did I say?
750.
Sorry, 7.5 million.
Okay. So for your second still stands?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we'll go to public comment.
My name is Richard Ween, and I think this is a very positive amendment, and actually should have been calculated in at its origin, because the memo says that rural Alaska has to deal with, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, greater than the CPI. So I know that the enemy of good is perfect, but it would be wonderful if it would be CPI plus 2 or something which would actually keep up with the monetary, I'll just say, crisis that we have to deal here with costs. So, but I'd like to thank Mr. Pike for that amendment, but in the future, it's going to have to be just a titch more. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wing. Is there any other public comment on the amendment? Okay, seeing none, so now we'll have discussion on the amendment.
I think, I spoke a little bit about it already in terms of the inflation. It goes to Anchorage CPI because it's a statewide resolution. I think this is something for the state, so that's our reference point for inflation around the state. So yeah, it'd be great if you could say CPI plus 10% or something, but I think we'll go with that one. See that? I think the main objective here is to increase it annually without the necessity of everybody going around and doing this. And if we get the legislature to do that, that would be fantastic.
Thank you, Tim. And I'll just kind of bring this about to, I agree with the amendment. And the point is, this is just requesting that the legislature and the governor do this. The more letters from different communities, the better. And I think it's good whether other communities are doing it as this. And I think this will also key in to think about not just one monetary amount, but actually consider inflation. So I'll support the amendment. Tor?
Yeah, I mean, I think this principle needs to be in function here as far as which CPI to use. Plus, given the more we put on it, the less it's already less than great chances for get reduced even more. My only real concern though is that we're different than everybody else. Because I mean, if we're trying to present a united front to the legislature and the governor, having them all be the same has a certain amount of value. Honestly, I don't think they're going to read, if they get 50 resolutions like this, they're not going to read every one, so they may not even So I'll vote for this, but it just gave me a little bit of pause there, that if we were, you know, if this is something that the Harbor Mass Association had said, get this passed, then I would have then said, no, we don't want to do this, but apparently it's not exactly what happened, so.
Kristen, you have something?
Yeah, I definitely support the amendment. Maybe ask Stan to ask his other fellow harbor masters to include that in their resolutions, maybe.
I'll look into it.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So Sarah, can you
want me to repeat it?
Yes.
I got it this time. All right, so the amendment before you is to insert on line 35 after 7,500,000 to be increased annually by acreage CPI, and then it would be per eligible project. All right, so motion on the amendment. Mr. Pike.
Yes.
Mr. Yestad?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mr. Saline?
Yes.
And Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Okay, the amendment passes 6-0.
Okay. So that moves us to item E.
No, now we're back to the main motion.
Oh, shoot, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
If there's no other final comments. Okay. All right, so voting on the main motion as amended, Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. Yestad?
Yes.
Mr. Saline?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mr. Pike?
Yes.
And Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
All right, the motion passes 6-0 as amended.
Okay. So now we're moving to item E. Discussion, direction, decision on acceptance or rejection of the state's airport lease. John, do you want to give an update before we make, or give a presentation first before we do the motion? Or it seems like it might be more appropriate to do that before we make a motion.
Yeah, I'll just give a really brief overview, because most of this will be cleared up through questions and answers if you have them. But essentially in front of you is a copy of the state's lease that has been presented for our signature or consideration and then potential signature. I would say that little has changed since the first draft, and little has changed since the presentation that was made by the state. We talked about the reasons behind a lot of the operational requirements and fees that are embedded in the lease. So what I've done is, my memo is essentially a business case that explains what the total cost of this lease would be to the city. And with that, calculated if we were to essentially change nothing, meaning charge no more fees, whether that's head tax or driver facility charges or a TSA reimbursement fee, if we don't change anything about our fee structure and follow the lease as presented, the net present value over the 55-year term is a $16.2 million loss to the city of Borough Sitka. So what I did is I laid out some alternatives, not necessarily as things that I need the assembly to consider or choose. I laid those alternatives out as these are possible ways that we could recoup those fees to get the airport lease to break even if the assembly were to decide to move forward with the lease. As you are aware, there's a pretty big airport improvement project kind of hinging on some lease assurances. I've heard answers on either side of the argument that the lease needs to be in place for the project to happen. And I don't know, I wish I knew the true answer on that one because I have heard both sides of it. But grant and project aside, our current lease expires in June 30th of next year, so we do need to get a fresh lease in place if we're going to continue with airport operation. I'd also like to point out that in those alternatives, I talked about potential fees. I just want to reiterate that those are not final. Those fees, if we were to ever charge those, whether it be head tax, as I said, those will be negotiated in future subleases with the tenants of the airport now. So Alaska Airlines, Delta, the restaurants there, the rental car agencies, we would have to negotiate that in our subleases. That's not going to be part of this lease. And I know in one of the alternatives that I mentioned, parking, that does not mean that we're doing parking and that's the fee we're going to charge. That's just one of the options on the table and a way to earn some revenue. But parking is not part of the lease that was presented by the state. The state is going to, as it stands right now, keep parking. So again, I just try to do a business case, lay out some options, and just kind of express the true costs. And I'm open for questions on anything.
So John and Sarah, so before we go to discussing this, because we do that first, before this is the discussion direction, we're voting on whether we're going to vote either to approve tonight or not approve, or move to the next assembly meeting approval of the lease itself, and then we're going to determine one of the options to pay for what later.
No, the assembly is not deciding on any of the options at all. The only thing that the assembly is deciding on right now is whether or not to move forward a lease.
Yeah,
those options I'll have to work on in subleases in the future with tenants. Those subleases, those are approved by the state, not by the assembly, because the state is the leaseholder, and it's more or less like a consent to assignment that we would ask them to approve.
Okay. Tony, you said your hand.
Yeah, I've had a lot of heartburn about this, and I will freely admit that my first knee-jerk reaction was to give it to the state. But it's increasingly obvious that really isn't an option, because then the state will just run it at a level that they feel is appropriate. Have anybody been up to the ferry terminal lately? And John and I were talking earlier, that might mean that they only provide security for one flight a day, which would completely choke them out. So what actually I want to talk about, I think we have to, in fact, but I'm going to argue for holding off for a couple of weeks, because I have been thinking a lot about the parking. So apparently the state is going to charge for parking if we don't, but if we take the parking lots in the lease, which I think the state would be amenable to, honestly, as much hassle as they've had with it, you would think that they'd almost put it in extremely inexpensively, I would think. We would at least control that. And there's been a lot of issues with the parking lots, with the amount of long-term parking and things like that. And if we lease the parking lots as well, we can at least fix that, and we at least have some control over the amount we'd have to charge for parking. It sounds like parking charges are coming whether we do it or the state does it, and I'd rather have control so that we can try and keep it down as low as possible. And then, I was thinking something where maybe we just have a, hourly rate with a cap and not have long-term parking. Just say, okay, if you make it to the cap, you can park overnight, so we don't have to worry about that. I don't know, and that's for another discussion later, but what I am concerned about is having control over the parking. And the state seems to be, and I know that we would have some added costs to go with that, but again, paying for parking sounds like it's coming whether we want it or not. It's always one of my favorite things about our parking is that we don't pay for it. But so I think we could cover that, and we would at least be able to listen to people's concerns and try and make changes. Right now, and the way it is with the state, it's like talking to a brick wall. When you have, we had about a month ago, we had a person writing us emails about the problems he was having with parking, and I emailed back and forth with him a bit, and it was frustrating because I couldn't do anything. And if we'd have come together as 7, we couldn't have done anything. So I would argue that if we're going to go ahead and do this lease, we should at least look into the parking, which I should think would in 2 weeks, we should be able to at least ask him what, about that. Am I wrong on that?
John, go ahead.
I mean, I can give you a brief update, is that nobody's responded to the RFP thus far, and it sounds like they're going to extend that for looking for a parking manager. But if we were to take on parking, and this is in my business case actually, that I mentioned that I have not considered the cost of that lease or putting in the infrastructure for the parking. So that would, if we were to take that over now in this lease, that would be a cost extended to the city. There would be the maintenance of the lot, paying the lines, the snow clearance, installing concrete barriers and the machines to get in and out if that's where we decide to go. What I had said, if we were to look at parking in the future, my desire would be, and this has been my conversation with the state as well, my desire would be that they've already set up that structure and built that infrastructure for us and handed us off a clean operating system so we don't have to build that ourselves.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who has any comments? Tim?
So, you haven't had a conversation about the parking with the state at this point in time?
I've had many conversations with the state about the parking, and they're willing to lease the lot to us, but as we've heard before, they treat all lessees the same, and I imagine that square footage cost would be the same amount that they'll charge anyone else.
Okay. I mean, I guess the question is, what will be different in 2 weeks?
I personally don't believe anything will be different in 2 weeks. I think you remember when we discussed while Mr. LaRue was at the table that this could potentially be a two-reading event. And I learned that this did not require an ordinance to go along with it, and without having an ordinance, it doesn't require 2 readings, and that can be approved tonight with a motion. The only thing we would gain is more time for the public to review the lease and really digest the information and the options that are on the table to fund the airport.
And, I mean, I think the parking has been definitely mixed up in people's minds around this particular lease, right? When I first saw it in the packet, I thought, oh boy, parking, we're going to deal with that. But that's not actually part of this. This is just strictly leasing the facility at this time and adding some responsibilities that we didn't have before. And so the business plan you presented largely explains how we're going to pay for the increased costs because of the added responsibilities that the state is imposing due to this lease. Would that be a correct statement?
Partially correct. I would say, I'm going to take the state side for a little bit, there's not really any added responsibilities, so Kelly's smiling. These are responsibilities that have always been there. They just haven't been done. Either we don't have the manpower or they don't have the manpower. I mean, curbside security, it's happening, but I would say not at the level that it should. Lot management has been underwhelming, but that's just based on manpower. But the regulations that we're required to follow in this new lease, they're just more clearly laid out than they were in the last lease.
And did I read correctly, these regulations are not necessarily just the state's? These are also things that the FAA is interested in.
That's correct.
John, clarification what you just said.
Hold on, Troy.
Sorry, I just wanted to.
Tim,
I'll wait.
Okay.
I just want a clarification on what he said.
Okay.
So you're saying that you couldn't get the parking added in the next 2 weeks?
Get parking added to a lease?
To the lease.
We absolutely could if that's where if the assembly wants me to go back to the state and say, add the parking, we want it, we can do that.
That was my question.
Okay, thank you. JJ, you had a comment?
I'm not in support of adding parking to this lease. I think the time frame needs to be considered here. This lease is to start next summer, July 1st, and that is not feasible for our manpower at our public works or anything to get that going in that amount of time when they have a large project, many large projects on their docket at the moment. The conversation around parking or is for future expenses and is, as far as I can tell, not needed to be in place during this lease time. That can happen next year or after. Probably after the completion of the airport would be a good time to just move on to considering how to pay for it. Since grant funding is going to cover the construction costs, we're looking at operational expenses. And although we do incur those operational expenses starting July 1st, there's some flex time there into when we need to move forward, cover that. So parking now in this lease tonight, next reading, I would not support that. What I would support tonight is a conversation around concessions and the added expense to our vendors that are in that airport. And so, John, have you had communications with the people that are currently providing services in our airport? Do they know what's coming? Have they seen this?
Yes, they have.
Because that is, the people we need to keep on board and to keep in service here. 12% increase that passes through to customers for purchases at the restaurant, and to alcohol, 6%, 5%. These are all going to be things that directly impact our visitors, our users of the airport. And that's something I'd like to hear a comment on from the assembly tonight.
I'll go ahead and chime in unless Chris, did you have something? Okay, I'll go ahead. Yeah, I spent a lot of my weekend reading the lease, which was super exciting. I'm going to support this lease. It's not exactly what I would have liked, but I also understand that the lease that was signed many years ago, it's just not the world we live in. There's a lot more federal requirements passed on to the state, and there's, coming up on $43 million project that we need to get in order to rehab and increase the size of our airport facilities. I believe that's crucial. And I think based on John's business case, I would prefer not to add for clarification, I would prefer to have John sign these as is without adding parking. We can deal with that later. That's not, in my mind, was what going to make or break this. The real cost, the real thing that is going to help us pay for this is adding I think it's $5.50 per passenger fee with the airlines. As far as JJ is concerned, or question about the lease, the leases for the concessions. Yeah, I'm not thrilled about that either, but it is, again, John, correct me if I'm wrong, federal requirements. So we don't really have a choice. And I do agree it's going to pass on costs to the travelers who come and then also to the locals who use that, but can't really control that. Something I did notice, and I asked John about this yesterday, I believe, is when you're looking at the concessions, there's up to 50,000 of the first 50,000 every year we're allowed to use. Is that right, John, what we talked about? And then after that?
The concessions charged on the first 50,000 in sales in total at the airport, not per sub-lessee, just in sales in total.
Okay.
It's exempted.
Okay. So, and there's no, my question was, is there anything lever in there to adjust for inflation, and there's not, so what $50,000 is now is not going to be the value of $50,000 20 or 30 years from now. It's just a note, something I noted. I would like to support this so we can get this signed and get it behind us. We've asked John to kind of be more aggressive, and he's shown us at the table and many times that there's been some negotiation, but not a lot of things have changed, and I don't believe that we are going to be able to change that, at least not in the time frame needed to sign this. So I encourage signing this. We can do it tonight, or if somebody wants to wait until the next meeting to allow for public comment, I think that's fine too. I'm not really strong opinion on either way. So those are my comments.
Yeah, I also spent time reading this lease. It was interesting, and it hasn't changed a lot since John first presented it to us, unfortunately, because I don't think the state negotiates particularly. They just nod their head, I think, and kind of do what they want. So, I agree with the lease. I think waiting a couple weeks, I'm fine with that. I agree the parking probably needs to wait a little bit because I don't want to muddy this. But when I look at this, it's less about the project than a 55-year lease, right? Like, we are signing a long-term lease for this airport. So, when I read it, it was, doing the project is fine, but that's at the beginning of this thing. We still have many, many years after this that we need to both maintain the facilities and continue to operate an airport. So, I think when you look at it that way, waiting a couple of weeks to come back and say yes to a lease is not a big deal. Like, we want people to have the opportunity to realize that this is a very long-term thing we're talking about here. And yeah, there's a big project associated with it, but if we don't sign the lease, the state takes it over, and then we're going to get what we get. So, I think it's in Sitka's best interest to maintain control of its airport and maintain control of that experience for everybody. And it may come to the point where we, as the assembly, need to work with the concessionaires over there to figure out how we're going to help them be successful. I'm not suggesting subsidies, but there's probably a lot of creative ways we can look at how we can structure that so that they can still be successful over there and the locals will still have opportunities. So I think there's a lot of opportunities going forward. This long lease, 55 years is a long time. So I think we are making decisions for the future. We need to be real careful, and we need to have plenty of time for people to have concerns about it. But I want to be real clear, it's about the lease of the building. It's not about parking, and it's not about all the other pieces of the puzzle. The business plan is just some examples of how this might work. I would like to see the Assembly have another conversation about what that looks like, so that you have direction in terms of what we think is important going forward, and which of those business plans makes the most sense for Sitka. But because again, while they could change over time, this is a very long-term thing we're looking at, and that's why, for me, this is the project's fine. It's a big part of what's going to happen, but the lease is more important in terms of looking at what it does for our long-term.
Let Chris go first and then John.
I've been really frustrated with this whole lease negotiation, or maybe lack of negotiating. But John, I know, has been working really hard and has done the best he can for us. And in general, this needs to we need to maintain control of the terminal and the facility. Though I'm not exactly happy with all the terms, I think that maintaining control is important. Yeah, it is scary going into a long-term lease like this when I'm not totally happy. But maybe as time goes by and we make adjustments, it can get better. I guess the thing for me and for all of us Sitkans to realize is our airport is going to change for what we know of it, more than likely. Costs to us and probably everyone going through it will go up in one way or another. And though I don't exactly like change, I think this is change that we're going to have to make. And in general, I definitely support this lease, signing it, but I do think maybe it would be a good idea to postpone this until the next meeting, just so the public can read it, look at it, digest it, and we can maybe get some feedback. As long as that doesn't hamper anything with the project, I guess.
Okay, thank you, Chris. John?
I just want to clarify this whole analysis that's here in the MPD, and Mr. Pike hit it well. He said what we're here for tonight is this lease and what this is going to look like for the next 55 years, because we really need to consider some long-term planning. The options will be solved in subleases that will come back to this assembly so we can develop a plan. If you were to look at this instead of option 1, option 2, option 3, if you look at from do nothing all the way to option 3, that's kind of where I was going with this. The do nothing is an NPV loss of $16.2 million. The option one was we can put all the fees right on the airlines with a head tax and do nothing else, and that breaks us even, but barely. Option two was the next scale, where if you came down to cut that head fee down to a little bit lower, more reasonable level, all it's saying is we then have to come up with $350,000 a year in revenue somewhere. I didn't say where that was coming from, but we have to find that to break even. And then that's the option three. It said, well, to fill that $350,000 hole, really the only thing left at this point is considering parking in the future. Mr. Eastad, you said it well, that there's going to be some changes at this airport. Curbside security is a TSA mandate. We've hired an airport manager. He starts next week. But there will likely be a person in a vest or a police officer or some sort of security guard out there telling you if your car's not running and you're not actively loading or unloading, you need to move away from the curbside. So I think those days are gone. We're also going to have to consider what to do about the lodges that park all their vans and their buses right at the front door. So those are TSA mandates, and things are going to change at the airport, but they're things that should have happened a long time ago.
Thank you. John, something you said just jarred my memory about something, but yeah, Tim, good point on pointing out that this is a 5-year lease. I think we see this because we're looking at the packet, but people who are listening might not realize this is definitely a 55-year lease. I most likely will not be alive when this expires, and many of us in this room will not be. It's a long time. But the police officer thing, I understand we're going to try to get someone to do that, or I don't know how that's going to work, but my concern about if we have to have a police officer there present, I certainly hope it's not a thing where, you have a couple officers on patrol, one person goes to a call, there's an emergency and they need help, and other guy says, oh, I can't because I have to stand here for the airport security. Do you perceive as that being a possibility?
Best I can speak to is the FAA regulation. The FAA regulation says that if you have aircraft, I can't remember the FAR, but Kelly, is it 60 passenger sized plane? I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it's, if you have an aircraft that carries more than 60 passengers, for that aircraft to be on deck, there has to be physical security at the airport, whether it's contract security, police officer. Otherwise, you're in violation of that FAR, and the plane could potentially not come here. I've learned from the state that in other rural airports, they're sometimes flying out, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're flying out troopers to smaller communities to make sure they have security on deck for planes to be able to come in and out and provide a service. So it is an FAA requirement to have security present.
Okay.
I just a couple of things here. When we came to the meeting, I was like, we obviously don't have any real choice here. That's the frustrating part. I think we all expressed that frustration. My initial reaction was, well, let's just pass it because we don't have it. But I think Tim brought up a good point that even if we're over a barrel here, we probably should hold off a couple of weeks just so people can hear about it in the newspaper and on the radio, and to emphasize that we don't have any choice. Yes, those concession fees are coming in, and we're not setting that. That's not us. A lot of these things are just things that we don't have any control over, and our only option is to try and give it to the state and be at their mercy of how many flights a day we get into, So, but I do believe we should wait a couple weeks. In fact, not even 100% sure we need to have a motion to do that, but and let the word get out more. But unfortunately, it's not going to change much. And I will put in, not now. I can read the tea leaves that we probably should be looking at taking over parking at some point. if for no other reason to maintain the control. And, we may decide to subsidize it. I'm not sure if we could probably argue we could use some head tax because some tourists have to get on the plane out of here. Maybe not a huge amount, but we could probably argue that. I could definitely see scenarios where we subsidize, especially something like parking. So.
Thank you. Yeah, JJ.
Questions for you, John. In talking about the sublessees, do those agreements need to be reworked in advance of the start date of our lease with the state?
I don't believe so. It would be helpful if we had a clean master lease in place before we start negotiating some leases, because that'll tell us what the future of the airport looks like, what's the project going to look like, and what areas we specifically have.
Okay. Because then I was thinking timeline here. In page 7 of the packet, it outlines the leases that we have, and that means just the businesses that operate out of the airport. That's the airlines, the car rentals, the restaurants, even TSA. We have a lease with as owners of the building. And some of these leases are expired. So I imagine those would be the ones that you go to first, and you just work your way down. So that's helpful to know where we can tweak that revenue stream to cover things like that officer position from kind of day one of the lease we're looking at here in the States. Right. Thank you.
Okay, so I think feels like we've wrapped up this conversation. John, do you have something more?
I just want to add one more thing about concessions, because I know that came up and what that means. I made a strong push to say if we're operating the terminal building and we're collecting the concessions, I think that we should be able to keep those concessions so we can invest those back into our airport. FAA has very, well, I heard that concession reporting form that's common that the state uses with all the airports, the rates are common. The FAA has very strict regulations on where those revenues are then spent, and to not get too far in detail, it should be spent back at the terminal. So if they are collected at the terminal, they should be put back into the terminal. And that was my argument is, if we're collecting them, remitting them to the state, my hope is that the state is going to continue to put those back into our terminal, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. I was hoping that if I was able to keep them, I would be able to put them back into the terminal, but we will definitely keep an eye on that. The concessions are a requirement, and I was hoping that they could stay with us.
Thank you, John. Any other comments?
Want a motion?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I move to postpone this decision to the December 12th Assembly meeting to allow for additional time for public review of the business case and lease document.
Second. So it's been moved and seconded, and so Sarah, in this case, because much has been made, we do public comment. Okay. Okay.
Good evening, my name is Richard Lee. I think that this was a very wise motion to postpone it for 2 weeks. If anybody has spent the time reading the memo, if anybody has spent the time reading the lease, if anybody has spent the time reading 17 AAC 45, excuse me, they begin to understand the overall complexity of this. And so it is important to give the public an opportunity to digest some of the many issues that we face. But there is one thing that, that when it comes back at the next meeting, there's one thing that I noticed was not in the laws or the lease or the memo, was what are the benefits to the citizens of Sitka by maintaining ownership of the building, and what are the benefits for the city and borough of Sitka. And I think we really need a report on that in order to help see what's going on. We've already heard about parking fees, curbside, et cetera, but we're also talking 55 years. And that is something, if you put in place a head tax of $9, we saw what happens with Stan Eliason's motion from the harbor masters from 2006 to 2023. It was already, and I don't even think they're close, they need much more, it was already a 30% increase. So I don't see any forecasting within any of these business plans and how these things, and this is what really needs to be done, and that is forecast to know what the costs are going to be in, as best you can, over time, because in 55 years, it could be like a boat, a hole in the water, taking your money. Just remember the first great days of boat ownership is the first, when you buy it and when you sell it. And so you have to really think, and this seems to be really rushed through. And we, even if it needs an extra meeting, we really need to talk about the details, what the effects. We hear from Mr. Christensen, well, if we get parking, we'll subsidize it. Well, that's another cost, and maybe the state won't want to build it, and if we take over, there are just so many issues, especially the concessions. And you need to read to see the cost of those concessions to the people. I went to a restaurant, the steak was $86 here in Sitka. I didn't buy one. So bottom line is, this is an item which needs to be discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for us to be heard of this? Thanks to me better. I would like to make a comment for the discussion. You know, we really don't have much to say because there was a comment by a person to be heard. I could just like the public to understand. I would say the benefit of maintaining control of the terminal is that we can continue to have frequent flights to and from Sitka. The state could, I'm not saying the state is some evil monster, I'm just saying the state doesn't have as much money or they don't prioritize Sitka for some reason. We could maybe not have as many flights to and from Sitka. And that affects not just the economy, but quality of life, because we get things like food, emergency supplies, medicines that come in, all sorts of things, all sorts of reasons why we need a regular and consistent flight schedule. So that is, in my mind, the number one reason why I don't want to back out or try to get out of this, because we need to have this kind of service. So, unless anyone has any discussion, because we've already talked a lot, I'm not seeing any heads nod or anything like that. Chris, did you have any other comment? Okay, and Sarah?
All right, so the motion on the table is to postpone the decision on acceptance of the lease to the December 12th assembly meeting in order to allow for additional time for public review of the business case and lease document. Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mr. Yested?
Yes.
Mr. Saline?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. Pike?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay. Thank you, Cindy, for the discussion. That was healthy and robust, and it was a good decision. So let's move on to persons to be heard. This is on for 3 minutes for anything on or off the agenda.
Good evening. Richard Lean. I wish the city and borough of Sitka could control the number of flights coming in and out of Sitka, but I'm afraid that's probably up to Alaska Airlines scheduling, Delta, and how many people have the money to be able to come to Sitka by airlines. So I'm unsure us maintaining the airport per se will necessarily ensure the number. I can assure you, if we wanted to make that happen, there is a substantial cost to that. And so you have to remember, as I said previously, this is a very complex situation, and this is your time to shine. You need to explain it very well to the citizens of Sitka, because this is going to be a very big deal, especially as it relates to all of these costs. I'd like to remind everybody that subsistence is also a very big issue, and you need to educate yourself. Those rules are published. It's easy. You can Google them, read them, and understand where Sitka comes, because I don't know, if I ran a business and I lost subsistence, there'd be a couple of heads that rolled. Or at least I'd want to know why we lost it and what within our city planning caused us to lose it. So it'll be very interesting to see. Now, my next and I guess final report, since I only have 1.5 minutes, is that the city needs to move from tourism promotion to tourism management. And I think that's what, in some ways, the Tourism Task Force is looking at. But it is very interesting that we give $500,000 to Visit Sitka and the Chamber. And I think that this money needs to be repurposed. I can think of quite a few different ways it could be repurposed. But if you look at the structure of the chamber and so forth, you can see that it is something which is, they have different kind of rules as to how they want to spend that money. And I think that if they're going to have the glossies, let them charge for it. Give out maps, sure, that's great. But the important thing is we need to go from promotion to management, because it is really changing the entire complexion of the city. And when the glow comes off the rose, we are going to be left with something which may not be recognizable. So from promotion to management, and take away that money from the chamber. And
thank you.
Kent Larkow. Never really comfortable up here speaking to you guys. It's never been. It's more uncomfortable today because, you know, the way I was not reappointed to the Sustainability Commission. I believe it would have been nice to be here for that vote, and appreciate your comments at the time. Regardless, I appreciate you all for serving the way you do. It's not easy, and all decisions are fought. So I'd like to get past that, and this work we did as outside the commission, and continue to concern myself with energy in our community. I think it's foundational to our ability to live here, thrive here, and I see the current environment, the current money that's available through the Department of Energy and the way our national government's investing in energy, that this is a time period when that's not going to repeat itself, and that there's opportunities today that are not going to come around again. I'm concerned that that we're not taking full advantage of those opportunities. And you know, I guess I just encourage you to learn more about what the city has been selected for in the C2C grant, and what the Department of Energy came to you with in a second grant that wasn't applied for, competed for, and that you have decided in the previous meeting to not pursue, to not learn more about. I think we've established a good working relationship with the Department of Energy, and that's shown itself by them coming with more money. And if we, you know, if we refuse and delay, we're gonna not take advantage of the opportunities that are present. And so I hope we do. Maybe we can revisit some decisions that have been made regarding the offer of the Department of Energy. Anyway, thank you for serving. Might not see things the same all the time, but I do appreciate you serving. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. Is there anyone else for persons to be heard? Come on, Dave Miller, I see you in the audience.
Actually, I do.
Okay, Tor, you have a
Christensen. So I wanted to, again, talk about Wrangell a little bit and what that means to us here in Sitka. Those last week or so, or since that happened, I know I've been having flashbacks to the days I spent on the hillside with a shovel of an excavator inches from me and staring at mud until I was seeing it in my dreams. And that I thought about how that was, I'm not going to say life-defining, but it definitely is one of the memories that I can't get rid of. So again, I hope that we can reach out to those we know in Wrangell. I have a lot of friends in the Wrangell Fire Department who I haven't called because I know they're busy. But I have a Wrangell Fire Department jacket that I'm very proud of. And so I hope that we can all think of them and try and think about they're going to be needing support in the next few months. And maybe, I don't know if they need any help from experience, from our experience of John's, or we can make our staff available and things. I really hope we can do that because I think as much as anybody in the world, we know exactly what they're going through right now. So.
Thank you, Tori. I'm not seeing anyone come up, no person to be heard, so on that, we'll move on to reports. The mayor is absent, so that brings us to administrator report.
A couple quick things. Yeah, our hearts go out to the folks in Wrangell. The last city manager there is a ex-ghostie and a friend of mine. He happened to leave the job to the Friday before that happened. I reached out to him. We've had a few discussions, and I think he put it best when he said Wrangell really needs prayers right now. As far as agency support, we've offered whatever support we can. I know that they've asked, and we sent over some dogs to help with the search. I got that report over the weekend. But again, our thoughts and our prayers are with the community of Wrangell. Two quick things. I have not yet been successful in my search for a permanent electric utility director. But I have assigned Mike Schmetz as the interim director while I continue the search. Now that things are starting to get people into places, I've reached out to the Department of Energy, specifically the folks that created the ETIP program and C2C, had a good discussion with them on what our needs are here and how those programs can help. Bree and our Sustainability Commissioner are going to have a much more active role, and I've asked that our Sustainability Coordinator now be the project manager of those two programs. So we're going to meet with DOE here in the very near future and make sure that these projects are scoped for Sitka's needs. So that is moving forward again. Finally, on the tourism front, typically every year we talk about sending the mayor and I to Sea Trade to talk about tourism. And it's interesting, you know, that this started out with trying to sell Sitka, and the past 2 years have really been, all right, how do we get a better relationship and control and manage things here in Sitka? But we were just invited recently, I guess CLIA started a new Pacific Northwest Cruise Symposium, and that might be a more appropriate use of our funds and time to go to. But since this is the first year, I don't know how many players are actually going to be there, but that's at the end of January, and that's going to be a consideration. I may have to come back to the assembly for some potential travel funds or talk about maybe moving efforts from one to another. But as you know, cruising in Southeast Alaska, or just Alaska in general, and the Pacific Northwest and Canada, it's a regional strategy because one community's decisions affect the other communities, and I think it's really good that this group is Alaska, British Columbia, and Washington, so I think this trip could be worthwhile.
Thank you, John. Next report will be Attorney Brian's not here, so it goes to Liaison Representative. Representatives. Anyone?
Yes, as Tourism Task Force with Chris, we've got a lot coming up in community engagements for the next month and 2 months. There is a community engagement event very similar to the one we had recently on Thursday, December 7th, from 4 to 8 p.m. here at the Centennial Building in the auditorium and rooms 1, 2, and 3. It's a little bit more spread out than it was last time, and a repeat of the content from our previous one. So as you've come up with some more ideas, please refrain from kind of doubling up with your comments previously. And there will be a traditional town hall. If you do want to come and speak for a certain number of minutes, that is Monday, January 22nd. From 6 to 8 p.m. Then that follows the track. Actually, excuse me, that was a planning meeting for the tourism town hall. The traditional town hall will be on Tuesday, January 30th at 6 p.m. If you want to come to the planning meeting for the task force, come to the one on the 22nd. So we, as a task force, are really wanting to hear Sitka's ideas and strategies, and there's these 2 opportunities coming up where you can share in the planning of this town.
Thank you.
Kevin?
Yes.
Let me add on to JJ's report. There will also be a survey that you can take online. I think even this can be accessed by QR code and all that, and not sure where else it'll be able to find it, but it'll be a survey, and it's kind of dedicated towards right sizing, a number kind of survey. So that'll run from roughly December 15th to January 15th, and then that's kind of what the town hall will be targeted at, is some sort of number to look at. Yeah.
Thank you.
I actually have a comment to add on that. Late today we found out that the traditional town hall on January 30th may need to be rescheduled as this venue isn't available that week. So more to be inferred on that.
Okay, so you will update us and the public when that is rescheduled. Toward you?
I have another. I don't know if you want to wait for Sarah or...
Well, I was just seeing if there's anybody else. I don't have anything, so let's do Sarah first.
All right, so we have 2 December meetings, the 12th and the 26th. And then I have a long list of vacancies on our boards and commissions. So we have the Animal Hearing Board, Health Needs and Human Services, Historic Preservation, Investment Committee, Local Emergency Planning, Parks and Rec, Tree and Landscape. So if you're interested in serving or learning more about these seats that need to be filled, contact our office and we'll get that info to you.
Thank you. For other?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk to the rest of the assembly about an ordinance that Tim and I have been working on, that because of Brian's absence, we're actually hoping to have it on tonight's agenda, but it became pretty obvious that wasn't going to happen. And what it is an ordinance that will require large diesel buses to, number one, be tested every year for emissions. And I spent a bunch of time with the EPA. I'm going to the EPA about how to do that, so it's very easy. And number two, that they'll be required to get a permit every year, get tested, and there will be a limit on the number of permits. I'm hoping to have enough of it done to take to the Tourism Commission on the 13th. Our original plan was to introduce it this meeting and immediately suggest that we throw it to the next Tourism Commission meeting. But I think we can, there's no reason why we can't take it to them beforehand. And so so that there would not be an unlimited number of permits. And it would only, by the way, apply to internal combustion engines. So electric, they don't need a permit. So that as a way, and I'll be real clear, this is a way to control the flow into town, to slow it down. And so we don't get overwhelmed with so many all at once. I don't like it when we have major stuff come up and nobody else in the assemblies even knew we're working on it. So that's why I'm mentioning it now. It's to give fair warning and to give warning to the folks. I mean, it's going to be, if we get into the assembly and things, it's going to be a full room kind of thing. So I don't want to blindside anybody. So, I've been thinking about this for a number of months now, trying to figure out how to make it work. And unfortunately, right when we kind of I got a memo to Brian to say, okay, this is what we want to have in it, he left. So I'm not sure how we're going to get around that. But I thought it was important to let people know we were working on that. A big reason I was pushing so hard to get it on the table is so that it's at the beginning of the winter so everybody has time, nobody gets surprised. So yes, we were working on that, and like I said, the hope is to get it on the agenda for the Tourism Commission on the 13th. So, Tim, I don't know if you want to add anything?
I think you summed it up well, thanks.
Thank you for that update. Appreciate the heads up. So it looks like that's it. The only thing I would say on that is be prepared to watch questions. Because that will be a big one from the public and the assembly. I'm glad that you're taking that to the Tourism Commission as well. So we're going to reports. There's no executive session, so we get a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Okay, we are adjourned.
Come back.
As far as
I got a meeting with him too in 6 minutes. I got tomorrow at some point.
I just want to be able to
Yeah.
It's not his head committee. I don't think there's that much to clear up.
I mean, he's getting there's my calendar tomorrow. I have a window from 9:30 to 10.
Yeah.
I got to use my regular computer.